Hello again, everybody. We are now working on the formal design project for value. We've been looking at, in our preliminary exercises, some basic household objects, which we took photographs of. We created distinct lines of contouring, cross-contour along the edges of the places where values changed from a lighter value to a darker value. We practiced with creating low key, meaning dark to middle values, high key, middle to light values, and high contrast, meaning the top 2 or 3 darks and the top 2 or 3 light values. To create 3 different variations on those images. Most of us succeeded in making things really well with the darker range of values and with the high contrast range of values. So as we're moving now into something more complex, you're going to find a photograph. It could be a self-portrait. It could be a portrait of a famous person. It could be something you source from the internet or take yourself. The idea is that you're going to find an image that you can work with that is essentially head and shoulders primarily, that is going to give you a good range of values. We're looking for about 6 distinct values to be present. So I selected an image of a model. I just did a quick search online for this purpose of the demo. This is the way it printed out at first, which is the way it was intended. I played around with it in Photoshop a little bit just to increase the contrast, to make it easier for me to find the variations in the values. So I quickly was able, using tracing paper, to find major contours along which the values seem to change. We want to render this image with very sharp edges between the values. I don't want you to blend them together. We want to have very distinct, crisp lines between light value, the next darkest, and so on. I used my tracing paper guide, and I just did the majority of the lines in the face, really. And a piece of transfer paper. This is essentially graphite that has been distributed across a piece of tissue paper. Putting the graphite paper down, tracing on top of that, I just retraced these guidelines, which left me with this image on this piece of paper, just for the purpose of a quick demo. I'm going to zoom in just a little bit so you can see the materials a little more clearly. What I have now on the left is the basic guide for the barriers between the values, and on the right I've just taken some white and black acrylic paint and I've been working to blend these colors together here to create the lightest value that I'm going to use. So looking at my reference, the 2 lightest portions really are here and here in this section. So I'm just going to use this light gray that I've made. It's not pure white, it's got a little bit of black in it, to paint in this section. I would recommend working either from light to dark or dark to light. I've chosen to go with my lightest values and work my way from those to darker values. I'm going to go ahead and put those values in where I see them. One trick that does help me when I'm trying to decide where to put a specific value is to squint at my source image. You can see I'm going a little bit outside of my original lines. That's okay, because I'm going to come back next with a darker value. And those darker values will sit right beside these, and they'll kind of cover up any overage that I may have inadvertently made. Because we've got a little bit more of this lightest light in the bridge of our nose. Go ahead and put a couple little spots into reflections in the gloss on our lips. This tiny line right here on the chin. I'm leaving the whites of the eyes alone for right now because I think I could even use the white of my Bristol board for that purpose, or I could go in paint them in with not the absolute white, but I mixed up a little bit of a lighter gray. I use that in place of absolute stark white inside the shapes of the eyes. You may not even be able to detect that in the video, but there's a little bit of brighter white right there. So the next thing I'm going to do is go for a slightly darker value. So I'm taking my gray, moving it a little bit to the side here, so I can save some of it in case I need to go back. I'm taking the majority of that gray, though, and using my palette knife to pick up just a little bit more black to mix in there to create my next value. I'm trying to do all the mixing with a palette knife rather than with a brush so that I don't have streak marks and so that the color is mixed really cleanly. So basically I'm just kind of scraping, pressing down, mixing it all together until it's nice and even, and then switching over to a brush to lift it up. So now that I've got this darker value, I can place that in the appropriate places right beside my first value to get this to read as a darker shape. I'm going to try to keep that edge, though, really crisp in between the two values. I think you can start to see how those values are changing from lighter to darker, but keeping and maintaining that edge. I'm going to go ahead and go for a much darker value just for the purposes of speeding up the demo a little bit. So again, I'm picking up some black. Black is a very powerful pigment, of course, so you want to use it sparingly, but I am making a pretty big shift now to this darkest shaded side on the left of my original source image. So there should be a pretty strong jump as I get into the shadows on the left side of her face. If you have multiple brushes, you could even assign one brush to each value. You could mix them ahead of time and have them ready to go. If you let the paint dry a little longer than I am, you'll be able to get very, very crisp and clean edges separating your values as you go. So ultimately, we're hoping for about 6 or 7 distinct, separate values. We want to see really clean lines between the sections as those values change. And you want to be able to create an image that's still recognizable as the face that you've chosen, but that really does delve into the subtlety of the values that you were able to see and to create. So this is a good beginning guide for you. I look forward to seeing what you're able to make yourself.